G'day and welcome to Gardening Australia. Barely a couple of weeks ago, all of the plants here were destined for the compost pile. But using some insider trade nursery secrets, they've all been brought back to life. I'll show you some of these techniques a little later. But first, let's have a look at what else is on the show.
I'm having a go at growing a giant pumpkin at the patch, but I'm also going to check out the competition to see how last year's giant pumpkin champion is going.
I'll show you a natural pest control method that allows you to strike a balance between the good and the not so good insects in your garden.
And Jane will be with a Melbourne couple who've lovingly tended their Victorian house and garden for the last 28 years with stunning results. If there's one thing that I love about my travels around the country is that I'm constantly meeting people who are happy to share their tricks and their techniques in gardening. And that's what I'm going to do today. Share a technique of the nursery trade that brings plants destined for the compost back to life. So these star jasmine were pretty much finished. They were yellowing, the leaves were falling off, and there was no real sign of life. But in 2 weeks, after applying this technique, suddenly there's new shoots and there's lots of lush green foliage coming back to life. The first step in the process is to take your plant that's overgrown, looking a bit sad. In this case, look at all the weeds in here. What you do, tip it up over a bucket and scratch out this layer of weeds, like so. And that way, you're dropping out any other wind-blown seeds at the same time. So once that's scratched out, grab your pot, a little bit of compost in the bottom, then return your plant to the pot, and there's some gaps. Run some fresh compost into those gaps, give it a little bit of a shakedown. That one's ready to go. I'll just get stuck into these two now. Complete 3 pots. I've got them in this tub, which is a bathtub. Now, bathtubs need to be filled. So what I have over here is the liquid that's going to fill the bathtub. In this case, it's a compost tea. To create tea, you need a strainer. Here we go. A pot, few holes drilled in the bottom. Into that goes your compost. Sit that on there, pour water in here, and that creates your tea. A couple of bits of Rio notched into the bucket as a stand, and we're done. Now, it's important to bear in mind that you can scale this operation to whatever you're doing. If you've just got a couple of pots at home, your bathtub doesn't have to be this big. You can put them into a bucket like that and just do a couple. Now, what's happening is the soil in here is already drawing up the compost tea, and I'm putting a little bit from above, and that way all of the minerals of this rich tea can be absorbed by the roots. Leave them in here for about 10 minutes, then put them up to drain, and to finish with, put a little bit of wood chip or mulch over the top for a couple of reasons. First of all, it'll prevent any weeds from growing up. Second of all, it'll keep it moist. And finally, you'll be able to tell which pots you've upgraded and which ones you haven't. There you go. A simple technique, but something you can use at home to rejuvenate any pots in your garden.
The Guyamere lily is a favourite native plant for many gardeners. But I know a lot of you wonder about what to do with the old flowering stems. This one's got a few months to go before it blooms. So once the flowers have faded, it's really a simple matter of getting a bush saw and chopping the old stem off as low as you can in the centre of the plant.
Stepping on bindii seed in a lawn is a horrible experience, and the solution starts in autumn and winter, because bindii is a cool season weed. It's a flat weed. It thrives where lawns are cut too low. And so the way you turn the situation around is to raise the height of cut. Bindii loves acidic soil, so you apply dolomite at the rate of 1 handful per square metre in autumn. Bindii also hates well-nourished soil, so you feed your turf with a handful of poultry manure per square metre in spring, summer and autumn. And if you put them all together, you get thick, vigorous growth in your turf, and it'll choke out the bindii, no spraying needed, and you've got a beautiful, lovely lawn.
Generally, when it comes to food production, bigger isn't always better. But I want to join an elite group of gardeners who grow freakishly big vegetables. Why? Because I want to win the giant pumpkin competition at our local country show. Now, you can't just use any pumpkin variety. You need this type, Dill's Atlantic Giant, that grow mega pumpkins, anywhere between 50 kilograms up to a tonne. Now, last time I entered, I came fourth with a pumpkin that grew to 80 kilograms. But this time, I'm sure I could do better. And I think I'm going to break the 100 kilogram mark. It's essential that I give my giant pumpkin plant the best start in life. So I'm creating a sheltered, warm pumpkin patch for it to grow in. Now, pumpkins like a very rich, well-drained soil, so I'm growing them in straight homemade compost mixed with animal manures, and I'm throwing in a little bit of blood and bone just for luck. I'm planting 3 seeds at a depth of about 2 to 3 centimetres, and of the ones that come up, I'll pick the strongest and remove the rest. Water is one of the most important factors. You need to really load the water on and continue to load it on as the plant grows. Now, because I've built the soil level up, drainage isn't a problem. I've got gravity working for me. The 4 bales should protect the young plant from any wind. And my brother-in-law's old window frame will create a greenhouse effect. Now, every 2 weeks, I'm going to come along and feed these plants with fish emulsion to really push them along. And then hopefully, in 30 days or so, we'll get flower and then fruit set. Then we go into phase 2 of training our giant pumpkin. Oh, and by the way, one last very important job. You need to sing your pumpkin to sleep every night before you tuck it into bed. Good night, sweetheart. Well, it's time to grow. Do-do-do-do.
Stay tuned to find out what competition Tino's up against later in the show. But right now, let's join Jane in a grand old garden.
When this well was built in 1865, it was the main water source for this grand Victorian-era house and garden. And although no longer working, it is one of the original details that makes this house in North Caulfield a most interesting snapshot in time.
Rob, tell us a little bit about the history of the place. How old is it?
Well, there are parts of the house that probably go back to around 1865, and there were certainly some additions done in the 1870s. And then in the 1885 era, when Melbourne was really booming, they did the tower and the grand rooms across the front of the house, and that was probably the time when the house became, a small mansion or a larger home.
The owners, Rob and Margaret Turnbull, have worked hard over 28 years to create a garden that's true to its historical origins.
So it's a labour of love, but what do you do in the garden and what do you do in the garden?
I'll probably get into trouble for saying this, but Margaret has a technique of gardening which I call chop and drop. Margaret comes along, chops, it drops, and then I come along and pick it up. Margaret's the creative director. I think it's fair to say Margaret understands the plants better than I do, and better understanding of plants, and I provide the labour and the support.
I'm very lucky because I just say to Rob, could you dig a hole there, dear? No, an inch further to the right, and he does it.
Did you try to match up the style of the house with the garden?
Certainly in terms of using bluestone, soft paving, gravel paths, the plant selection, the shape of the garden and the shape of garden beds, etc. Yeah, I'd say that it certainly influenced our decisions.
When I think of a Victorian-style garden, I do think of lots of colour and perennial plants sort of put into the garden.
Yes.
Yeah, and standard roses.
Oh, I love the roses. The scent, of course, is gorgeous. Got the reliable old icebergs here, but you know they flower so abundantly. And over the archway, I love the single Sparrow's hoop on that side, and the Eclair de Matin, which is more of an apricot-y colour, and the Seduction roses, which are very reliable, but unfortunately really thorny. They're awful to prune.
The combination that you've got with the roses underplanted by the mass colour and fragrance is very good. What kind of things have you got underneath?
Oh, they're cottagey plants, which I love the little dianthus with its musky sort of smell, and there's Snow in Summer, which is gorgeous in the spring and summer. And arabis, which I think is an old-fashioned thing you don't see very much. The spring, they're covered in white blooms in spring, and I love the furry sort of grey-green foliage. It's a very, very pretty thing.
Now, this is a nice shady area.
Yes, it's lovely in summer, but in the winter it's quite light because it's a deciduous tree, so you get a bit of light then. And a couple of years ago we put in hydrangea quercifolia, and they seem to be coping with both the shade and the sun.
What about the lovely border of lamb's ears?
Oh, they're gorgeous, aren't they?
Margaret, this is a really fine room through which you can see the beautiful garden.
I suppose a bit of a design element is that we've planted things where we can view them from the windows, and for example, the cherry tree out the front, I tried to get it directly in the middle of the windows to make it a bit symmetrical out there.
Oh, this is a lovely backyard, Margaret.
Oh, thank you.
Gee, it's got a real Mediterranean feel.
Yes.
And I do like the hedge of the Morea. I think that's wonderful. And then it's a great backdrop, and then this beautiful pergola. Rob and Margaret have created a garden that is lovingly connected with the era and the architecture of the house. And the result is that the two work seamlessly together.
I like to make the most of every drop of water in my garden. For example, this is a downpipe planter. Basically, it's a clapped-out old bin. The bottom had rusted out. So I've lined it with some heavy-duty pond liner and filled it with regular potting mix. What will happen is that when it rains and the water comes down, it'll fill this up and it will become a type of bog garden. Perfect for plants that like wet feet, like this peppermint. Pop that in there. Now, during dry times, I can give it a hand water and this will hold plenty of moisture. This will thrive. The beauty is the mint can't escape because it's contained, so it won't invade the neighbouring garden beds.
When it comes to rejuvenating your plants, different varieties require different techniques to breathe life back into them. In this case, we've got an orchid, and that's a clumping variety of plant. First of all, I've soaked it in water to loosen up the roots. Then I'm going to tip it upside down and get it out of its pot, and you'll start to see what's going on. Totally pot-bound. First step is to identify the dead bulbs and start to remove them.
You can tell whether a bulb's still healthy or dead just by looking at it. If you're still not sure, give it a squeeze. If it's soft and wet, you know it's finished. And either pull it out, or if it's a bit too fibrous, cut it out with some secateurs or scissors.
When it comes to removing the dead bulbs, I suppose it's a case of being firm, like get in there and rip them out, but be careful enough that you don't break away too many of the existing roots. In the case of this orchid, it's naturally broken up into 3 distinct clumps. And what I thought I'd do is the bigger clump we can put into a pot on its own, and then the 2 smaller clumps we can put them together because orchids don't mind living in a cramped environment. As for the mix around it, get a nice orchid potting mix. It's got barks in it, it's got fines, it's got coconut fibre. Put that in, well, that's it. And that brings us to citrus. First of all, citrus don't like competition around their root zone. So the first thing I'll do is clear all this out. Now that the downstairs is in order, it's time to head upstairs and get the canopy of the tree into some order. The first thing I like to do is get rid of these dead branches, and that will slowly open it up, and I'll be able to see exactly how I want to shape the tree to get it open and get rid of the crossing and give it some air and some light to bring new life into it. This may look a little drastic, but lemons can take it. And you can see that it's got some shape, and next season, 1 or 2 branches to be removed from the middle, and it'll open it up even more. Having a closer look at the root ball, I can see that there's just a few roots that have started to spiral, like this one here, that one, this one here, you can see it's heading around the base of the pot. So all you need to do is a nice sharp pair of secateurs like these, just snip those off. Same with these couple over here. And this one, well, that looks good to me. The next step is to pot it up again. So I've got some compost. I'm gonna put a good serve of that in the bottom, which will lift the pot back up. And then I'll put a bit of rock dust in there, a handful, for minerals. Then I'll put our lemon back in. And that's leaving us room to mulch as well. Add this nice mix, push it in around the edges. And just because it's here, I'm going to give our lemon a drink of our wonderful compost tea. And you can hear it happily slurping this up. Now, it goes to show you that with a little bit of effort, even those plants that you think are destined for the compost can be brought back to life. It's really quite easy.
Every healthy organic garden has good and not so good insects, but pests are every much a part of the ecology, as are the beneficial insects. The trick is to provide for both groups, the good and the not so good, and they'll set up their own balance. This will give you a garden that minimises the need to spray, and it maximises healthy, productive plants. In my garden, I use a natural method of pest control. I sow sacrificial crops amongst my food plants, and the idea is pests find the sacrificial crops irresistible, and they feed on them, not my food plants. And the longer they feed on my sacrificial plants, the more likely it is that predators will come along and finish them off. Now, in this bed, I'm sowing grain amaranth. All plants in the genus Amaranthus are powerful attractants to caterpillars. And in this garden, most of those caterpillars end up as moths, some of the worst crop pest moths in Australia. Now, this has very, very small seed. One of the ways I find sowing small seed is made easy and efficient is to mix the seed in a bucket of compost, a couple of handfuls of compost, and you stir it around, and then you broadcast it over the bed. And most fine-seeded plants like to see the sun. It helps them germinate. So I just lightly rake them into the surface like this, and they'll be up in a matter of days. I've got 6 different types of amaranth growing in my garden, and this is Mekong Red. Over there, I've sown it amongst my corn, and that attracts caterpillar pests and also grasshoppers, and hopefully they'll leave my corn alone. That's an example of a sacrificial crop in action. The beneficial or good insects that live in my garden include hoverflies, parasitic wasps and ladybirds. And to get those into the garden, I'm sowing flowers. Flowers provide pollen and nectar, and in this border, I'm sowing some cumin, basil, and some cleome. Between them, they'll bring in a whole host of gardening allies. It's important to feed beneficial insects throughout their life cycle, and the pollen and the nectar is primarily to bring in the adults. Now, if there's plenty of food, the adults become parents, and it's their children, the larvae. They're the business end. They're the voracious meat eaters that control most of my pests. If you see some damage in a garden, you're often tempted to spray. Don't. It's clumsy. You'll kill the good along with the bad, and you'll prevent that balance from being achieved. Now, over there, I've got a pre-existing border full of flowers that bring in beneficial insects. And the outstanding star amongst them is good old-fashioned goldenrod. The predatory wasps and parasitic wasps love it. So why not get outside now and sow a sacrificial crop, something that's irresistible to pests? Flowers to attract and feed beneficials, and something yummy to feed you, the gardener.
Earlier in the show, you saw my efforts at growing a giant pumpkin back at the patch. Well, I'm now in Sorell, just east of Hobart, to visit Shane Newitt, the winner of last year's giant pumpkin competition. And although he's my rival, I wanted to come and see how his entries are going this year. Because at the end of the day, growing freakishly large vegetables is a very friendly affair. Oh, I got no chance. That's a beautiful pumpkin. That really is. Do you mind if I get close?
Yeah, certainly.
I'll try not to breathe on it. Well, she's got length too. Well, crikey, I think I've got 2 chances of beating Shane, and that's Buckley's and none. What do you estimate its size is at the moment?
At this point, I'd say 360 kilos.
Wow. I know it's too late for me to kind of extract any of your secrets off you, but how did you get it this big?
Oh, look, we did a lot of work early with the seed. We started with fish liquid and seaweed kelp and got it away to a good early start.
So what are the optimal amount of days for this fruit to mature?
You need to work on around 80 days minimum to achieve the full weight and maturity of the pumpkin. A lot of growers take them off too soon.
That's a lovely bed of sand here. Is this for the drainage?
Yes, it's to keep all the moisture away from the bottom of the pumpkin. With that sort of weight, we don't want any moisture underneath the pumpkin and developing soft patches or any rot in the pumpkin.
But you've also got this padding on underneath.
Yeah, that's a special cloth. It's a wire mesh cloth, and that lets all the water filter through also. So anything that rodents that might eat up through from the bottom, it stops all those things.
Now, speaking of water, how much do you water this?
That's a good question, Tino. At the peak of the growing, you could possibly put on 350 litres a day.
Well, here's something my dad would be really proud of, music to the plant.
Yes, everyone has their take on the music to the plants. My daughters Bella and Jessica play the music to the plants and the pumpkin, and everyone has their theory on how it works.
What sort of music?
A lot of classical music. I had a bit of hip-hop going there one day and the figures went down the drain, so we went back to the classical music, yeah.
Now, just to give you an idea, this is from one seed. This is not a range of plants. This is one whole plant to feed this giant pumpkin. So how important is the amount of foliage on the plant?
This is most important, Tino, to have this optimum 10 metres by 10 metres. The foliage is very important. Each leaf, it's been proven, that produces 3 kilograms of weight per lifetime of the pumpkin.
So if I snap off some of these leaves, I might have a chance of beating you then.
You may do, yes.
Now, when you're selecting your fruit on such a big plant, when and how do you select which fruit to keep?
That's the most important part of growing these pumpkins, is the positioning of the fruit on the vine, for 2 reasons. One is as the pumpkin grows, it's going to wish to lift the vine up. Yep. And of course, they can literally pick themselves off the vine. And you need to have possibly a curve in the vine to allow, as the pumpkin rises, some slack in the vine. So as it lifts up, it's not going to wish to tear itself off.
Well, Shane, that is one awesomely sized pumpkin.
Well, Tino, if you think my pumpkin's big, wait until you see the girls.
Shane's daughters, Bella and Jessica, are also following in their dad's giant pumpkin growing footsteps and were last year's junior champions at the show.
Bella and Jess, this is Tino.
G'day,
He's come to have a look at your pumpkin.
Hello, how you doing, Bella?
We're going to show Tino the pumpkin. Okay, lift that back for Tino.
Oh my, it keeps going, doesn't it? It's a behemoth. This one gets played music as well, doesn't it?
Yeah.
What kind of music do you play?
Lady Gaga.
It seems to be working quite well, that's for sure.
They're leading the way with Dad. They're actually in front of their dad at the moment, I think.
You think in weight?
I think in weight. We're looking close to 400 kilos.
Wow. Now, the day before the show, it's a pretty big pumpkin. I got a mate to lift mine that was 80 kilograms. How do you lift something that's half a tonne?
You'd need quite a few mates to lift this one. Yeah. We're looking at a 130 horsepower tractor with a special harness and rope.
Yeah, this is interesting.
And these straps lift nice and evenly all around the pumpkin. And we have this soft marine rope that fits around the bottom of the pumpkin. And that just ties in these straps so it lifts evenly.
And then you just put it on the back of a ute, or?
Yes, once we lift the pumpkin up and slide a pallet under, we then lift that onto the back of a four-wheel drive ute and try our luck getting out of the driveway.
I've learnt so much from Shane, Jessica and Bella about growing giant pumpkins. We'll all be back on next week's program at the Bream Creek Show for the moment of truth when our giant pumpkins get judged. Wish me luck. I think I'm going to need it.
Well, that's it for this week. And remember, it's never too late for most plants. Get stuck in, give it a go, and give them a second chance. I'll see you next week for some more inspirational gardening.
If you've ever thought about keeping chickens, you're not going to want to miss next week's program. Find out how Tino, Shane and the kids go with their pumpkin entries at the local show. And Josh will be getting stuck into his veggies. So we'll see you next week.